As I said at the top of the show there, for the first time in history, television cameras have been allowed into our courtrooms with a trial at the Old Bailey. This marked a turning point for the future of the British legal system. The cameras will only be allowed to film a few minutes of each case when the judge is handing down that all-important sentence. But it'll allow the public an insight into cases, many of which will be high profile, and it's been heralded as a victory for broadcast media. But there are concerns that have been raised by many who feel that this act of sensationalism could actually imperil the sanctity of the legal process. Claims of cheapening the court systems have also been levelled at the TV intrusion. So I'm delighted to say that joining me now is the barrister and author of Justice on Trial, Chris Daw, alongside lawyer Andrew Eborn, and Sean Bailey is in the studio, and we'll be asking him his comments on that in a second. Andrew, can I start with you? We've had a slight chat about this. Do you worry that this will actually lead to an Americanisation where you start to see trial by media effectively?
Well, TV or not TV, that is indeed the question. I think the issue is basically this. There's absolutely, there should be transparency. The key is to make sure that justice is not just done, but seen to be done. But there are real concerns. And the concerns of this is that the effect that it may have on the justice system itself. We talk about the media. Well, the media works on sound bites and sensationalism. We look at what happened with Judge Munro's case, a tragic case, but it had all sorts of terrible elements about autism, all sorts of allegations about sexual abuse and so on and so forth. And it was all very, very sensational. If you're talking about educating the public, then that's one thing. But will the public actually be educated by what they're hearing? Because there's a lot of these cases are not what you see on television. They're not your wonderful LA law and so on and so forth. They can be very, very dry. And my concern is this, is that one, it is about sensationalism. Secondly, the effect it may have on the participants in the case. If you're a witness, for example, I know this is just the start where we're talking about sentencing, but the plans are to look at where else it might go. If you're a witness in a case, then you may well be intimidated. You may not go forward at all on that sort of basis. Also, witnesses and anybody appearing in court tends to be quite nervous anyway. And nervous witnesses, if you've got a camera there, will only make them more nervous. And as a result of that, they may not be as credible to the jury in that situation. Also, my concern is for the defendants, because you've got two trials, effectively. One is that which is happening in the court itself. The second is the court of public opinion. And that can be even more damning, as we've seen in the O.J. Simpson case, we saw in Johnny Depp and Amber Heard and so on and so forth. And that goes on for years. Whilst it may not be sort of dealt with very, very quickly, what then happens is the videos which are out there will be out there for many, many years, and those particular defendants will have real issues for many, many years to come.
Chris, you disagree with that, I'm assuming, completely?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I've been a criminal lawyer for almost 30 years, and I appear in trials which are regularly reported in the news all over the world, in the headlines, on television and in the newspapers. And the thing that I have grown more and more worried about, I'm not Sean Bailey, by the way, as your caption suggests, the thing that I've grown more and more worried about over the years is the mismatch between what actually happens in court and what is reported in the media and in the headlines in particular. And I can tell you, as someone who, as I say, has sat in court day after day and listened to evidence, often very difficult evidence, quite challenging, quite complicated evidence, and then read the news reports of the case later on in the day or the next day in the papers, and the two things are completely unconnected. And there's no comparison between what's being reported and what really happened. And that can't be good for our society. It can't be good for open justice. It can't be good for public understanding and engagement in the justice system, which is obviously so critical, particularly at a time when there is a lack of trust in judges in many quarters, in the public and in the press. So for me, open up every single court in the land. Of course, you have to protect vulnerable people, vulnerable victims, vulnerable defendants. But the truth is that anybody who wants to can go and sit in a public gallery in any court they like and watch the whole of the case. But just most people don't have the time or the opportunity or indeed possibly the money. They have to go to work all week. And so they just can't do it. So the only way that you can allow people to have free and full access on their phones, on their computers, on their televisions, is to put cameras in every single court, protect the vulnerable, protect people from exposure to difficult and compromising situations. And of course, there's a good point being made about about the impact on witnesses. And if certain witnesses are particularly vulnerable, or for example, if they make an application not to have their particular evidence televised, I'm sure judges will be very sensitive to that, and judges will control exactly what's allowed to be shown on television and what is not. But in the end, we're the public. We have the right to know what goes on in our courts. Put the cameras in, let the people decide.
OK. Andrew, do you want to come back to that?
Absolutely. And Chris made some great points on that. The trouble is that people will not watch the whole trial. What will happen, you'll get little sound bites, which again will be, and this is the way the media works, will be sensational sound bites that people work on. So actually the damage is going to be more when you're accompanying pictures and so on and so forth that side. And I think all witnesses, given the choice, would prefer not to have their statements made public. So if there were a choice for the witnesses, they would invariably say that they don't want it. The other thing that's often thrown, Chris, about this sort of side is that people are talking about grandstanding. The lawyers might show off a bit, and I know people of your reputation and so on and so forth wouldn't do that, but certainly it's happened in places in the States where you look at lawyers who suddenly become superstars in themselves. You see what happened in the Johnny Depp trial, and the wonderful lawyer for Johnny Depp, how she was promoted to being a partner afterwards and became a media sensation. And it's always going to be the sort of try before you buy, if you like. What it does is shine a spotlight on a system which itself needs some sort of balance in there. Because one of the things I think you made in your previous comments, Chris, is that it will shine a spotlight on some of the deficiencies in court. For example, if somebody's not got a lawyer, you can show how some lawyers are very good and somebody representing themselves. They always say if you represent yourself, you have a fool for a client. Well, it does show the need for financing, but it also shines a spotlight on our profession to turn around and say there are those deficiencies. If that's going to bring trust to the public, it probably isn't, is it?
Chris, do you think there's a point here to be made around the cost of it as well, if we were to televise every single court case? Because as you well know, better than I do, the justice system in this is creaking at the seams, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. And so, of course, the cost of broadcasting would have to be met by the broadcasters, not by the court system. And so I think we can put that point to one side. And secondly, we can assume that the broadcasters, quite rightly, as has been suggested, are only going to be interested in the more high-profile cases where it does involve either cases of particular extraordinary severity or complexity, or more importantly, where there are celebrities involved of one kind or another. We understand that. But that's how media reporting of the courts happens now. And, you know, up and down the land, you don't see a court reporter in every single courtroom, and you're not actually in reality going to see a camera in every courtroom. What you're going to see is the media choosing which cases will have particular public interest, and those cases will reach the public eye through television reporting, just as the same cases reach the public eye, but at the moment they reach the public eye through second-hand reporting. So they reach the public eye through the headlines and what journalists choose to write or don't write. Well, of course, the same thing's going to happen. There's going to be selectivity of reporting, but the difference is that the public are going to watch the thing for themselves. So they're not just going to hear, judge was soft on sentence. Why did this crazy judge give this sentence? As we see too often in the headlines, what we've seen this week is Judge Munro at the Old Bailey passing sentence in measured, careful terms, explaining exactly why the sentence was being passed, going into some of the really difficult features of the case to do with the autism of the defendant and the terrible abuse that the defendant had gone through as a child. People can then understand the whole picture. They can make their own mind up about whether the sentence was a lenient one or not, rather than just reading a splash headline about the judge being out of touch or soft. So I think
and that was, wasn't it, Chris? That was part of the reason. That was part of the reason that this was introduced in the first place, is to install trust in the system so that people would see for themselves. It's talk about the education and Judge Munro did a brilliant job about talking about her logic and what the guidelines are, so it becomes more of a science than an art, and people could hopefully understand that. The reality, however, is I don't think people are going to watch the whole thing. They're going to go for the sound bites. They're going to go on what the media look at. And also you have to say, well, are the public being educated? Because most trials involve all sorts of complexities about evidence, and unless you've got a commentator explaining what's going on and why that's important, why people are objecting and what the laws are, you're going to have problems with that as well, aren't you?
Chris, very brief final word.
Court TV. We've got to have a court TV channel like they do in the US, because they're allowed to film in the United States, in many, many states and in many, many courtrooms. We need a channel which just deals with what goes on in the criminal courts. It's one of the most popular subjects in TV drama. It's one of the most important and popular subjects for news headlines and news coverage. We see court cases covered day after day in the press and on television. Let's have a 24-hour channel with expert commentators, perhaps like yourself, who can actually explain what's going on, who can say to the public, this is what's going on, can discuss with maybe some of the lawyers involved, just bring it all out into the open. I don't think there's anything wrong with the public understanding and seeing what happens. And
have those safeguards, have the safeguards and work on that basis. I think that makes sense.
OK, we'll have to leave it there, though, but thank you very much to the two of you for your time. That was the barrister and author of Justice on Trial, Chris Daw, and the lawyer in the studio there, Andrew Eborn. Thank you.